79. His body was eaten by light, his spirit devoured. I hail thee, almighty and victorious death, thou grandiose darkness of the infinite, O void that makest room for all to be, hunger that gnawest at the universe, consuming the cold remnants of the suns, and eat'st the whole world with thy jaws of fire, waster of the energy that has made the stars. I have given thee thy awful shape of dread, and thy sharp sword of terror and grief and pain, to force the soul of man to struggle for light on the brevity of his half-conscious days. Thou art his spur to greatness in his works, the whip to his yearning for eternal bliss, his poignant need of immortality. Live, death, a while. Be still my instrument. One day, man too shall know thy fathomless heart of silence and the brooding peace of night, and grave obedience to eternal law, and the calm, inflexible pity in thy gaze. But now, O timeless mightiness, stand aside and leave the path of my incarnate force. Relieve the radiant God from thy black mask. Release the soul of the world, called Satyavan, freed from thy clutch of pain and ignorance, that he may stand master of life and fate, man's representative in the house of God, the mate of wisdom and the spouse of light, the eternal bridegroom of the eternal bride. She spoke. Death, unconvinced, resisted still. Unshakable, he stood, claiming his right. His spirit bowed, his will obeyed the law of its own nature, binding even on God's. The two opposed each other face to face. His being, like a huge fort of darkness, towered. Around it her life grew, an ocean's siege. A while the shade survived, defying heaven, assailing in front, oppressing from above. A concrete mass of conscious power, he bore the tyranny of her divine desire. A pressure of intolerable force weighed on his unbowed head and stubborn breast. Light, like a burning tongue, licked up his thoughts. Light was a luminous torture in his heart. Light coursed a splendid agony through his nerves. His darkness muttered, perishing in her blaze. Her mastering word commanded every limb and left no room for his enormous will that seemed pushed out into some helpless space and could no more re-enter, but left him void. He called to night, but she fell, shuddering back. He called to hell, but sullenly it retired. He turned to the inconscient for support, from which he was born, his vast, sustaining self. It drew him back towards boundless vacancy, as if by himself to swallow up himself. He called to his strength, but it refused his skull. His body was eaten by light, his spirit devoured. At last he knew defeat inevitable, and left crumbling the shape that he had worn, abandoning hope to make man's soul his prey, and force to be mortal, the immortal spirit. Afar he fled, shunning her dreaded touch, and refuge took in the retreating night. In the dream twilight of that symbol world, the dire universal shadow disappeared, vanishing into the void from which it came, as if deprived of its original cause. The twilight realm passed, fading from their souls, and Satyavan and Savitri were alone. But neither stirred. Between those figures rose a mute, invisible, and translucent wall. In the long, blank moment's pause, nothing could move. All waited on the unknown, inscrutable will.